Hello, everyone. I am Rainier McCall. I am a licensed mental health counselor, an EMDR consultant, board certified in telehealth, and a qualified supervisor for those seeking licensure as therapist in the state of Florida. I have worked alongside Pineapple since around 2018 or so, is my estimate I always offer. And today we're going to be talking about a beloved topic to me, which is understanding autism in yourself and in others. So, this is a topic that can clearly go down a rabbit hole, right? So, I'm going to try to keep it easy, keep it accessible, um, give you information that would be nice to know, and then go from there. Hopefully, things that you find along the way are of use. That's what I'm going for. So if I can give you a little bit of new language, a little bit of conceptualization to help you in your life, whether that's some self-insight or understanding a friend, family member, larger community, partner, we'll go from there. So let's go ahead and get started. All right. Okay, so our agenda today. We're going to be looking at traits overall, and this is going to kind of branch off into common traits, which is essentially diagnostic traits. How do we pick up on this? How are we able to say someone has this? What are some tools that we're using to do so? Right. Then there's what I put quotes around uncommon because there's plenty of people with, quote, uncommon traits, which unfortunately, these traits often lend to these folks being misunderstood or flying under the radar and experiencing late diagnosis. We're going to look at similarities and differences between other conditions just to maybe help tease out some of the actual differences, while the kind of overwhelm of some of the overlap. I'm just going to make a quick note on comorbidities, which is just a word meaning basically what comes alongside, potentially. And then we'll look at masking, which has a couple of different pieces to it. So I'll break that down, and that's pretty much where we'll end. So we'll go top to bottom across everything. Right. Okay, so I really taxed out this slide, right? So common traits of autism. This is pulled from a variety of different places. Lived experience, anecdotes, mostly though the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental, quote, Disorders, 5, and traits that are just historically seen. I'm a really big person that knows that as much as we have a home base to a degree with the DSM, which again is basically the therapist Bible of conditions, as it's kind of commonly known, that it does not hold the answers to everything, and things that have been held within its pages historically um, are not conditions. Things like LGBT experiences, and I'll just keep it there. So it is always a work in progress, just like we, are getting more information about spectrum. Asperger's has been removed. I won't get into a whole thing about that, but feel free to look into research about why that is the case. And we have gone to kind of a more spectrum methodology where there are levels, which I personally can sometimes see some benefit in, and other times do not. So we'll get into that a little bit later, perhaps. By the way, I kind of forgot to mention, I am personally on the autism spectrum. I identify myself as autistic. It is a very strong, front-facing, forward part of my identity. Um, so I speak from a place of professionalism, with lots of studying, research, involvement in advisory boards, um, working mostly with autistic folks, living amongst them, befriending them, being in community with them, and also, you know, having my own experience. So I'm drawing from a lot of different places here. But know that even though I'm drawing from multiple places, something might not, exactly work for you. So if I'm saying anything and you're like, lived experience is important. So just know that this is not meant to exactly be an introductory experience here, but we are scratching the surface. All right. So with that said, we're going to look at some common traits of autism. So a certain response to sensory needs, hypersensitive or hyposensitive. Hyper, of course, meaning that any sensory input kind of coming in might create a big response, or immediately become kind of overwhelming, potentially disturbing. Um, Not always, though. Sometimes we need a little less of something to get the effect that we need. For instance, we might just need like 2 minutes of the fan cooling us down instead of other folks 20 or 30. We might go from, oof, oh my gosh, I'm so hot. Put the fan on to oof, frigid, things like that, right? So it doesn't mean it's exactly I'm very uncomfortable, but just you might need a little less of something. And sometimes it's just how we go about our day. Um, Hyposensitive, of course, means that we might need a lot more of the input. Um, like me personally, I'm very hyposensitive to certain sounds. So, no, I don't like screeching and loud crosstalk sounds, but I like repeating noises. Um, which that will connect with our last little point here on this page. So I'll save it for there. Um, so I like to seek out repeating of sounds. I will repeat them myself. I will seek others to repeat them. I'll replay videos, replay music. I've been known to listen to one song on repeat for hours personally. I don't make other people entertain this. I do make them entertain sometimes, call and response, as I call it, if I say something and want to hear it out loud. Um, what vacillating here is meaning is that sometimes we go from hyper to hypo. For instance, sound is another one while we're on the topic. You could be in your car jamming, 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 and then just be like, whoa, so loud. This is ridiculous. And nothing actually tangibly has changed. Um, Nothing having to do with the creation of the song where you're listening to it. Just your brain's like, okay, cut. Um, so there's that. Most people have a couple things that are static and some vacillate. For instance, interoception, which we won't get into all the sensory aspects today, but interoception is your internal understanding of your world, picking up on need to urinate, defecate, eat, sleep, things that we're all wired to have. But whether we tend to not pick up on them and use, going to the bathroom as a treat, or we feel one thing and we're like, I'm gonna pee my pants, um, or I just had a little gurgle in my stomach. Am I going to throw up? Am I becoming ill? Um, which can be a difficult process and sometimes feel to folks like hypochondriasis, right? Um, so things to think about. Now, monotropism is a word that is not familiar to many people, but I love to share it. It's a bit of a newer word. Fun word for single point of interest, essentially. What you come back to at the end of the day, whether that's an interest point, a fixation point, a routine, a quiet home base. how much you are driven by things like that. I am highly monotropic. Right now I'm not in my usual home, and although it is very comfortable and lovely, part of me is quite jumpy about, oh no, the things I usually do at the times I do, where I do them, I cannot. I must adapt. But, right. So, monotropism also, by the way, can be present in ADHDers as well as a good old combo types, ADHDers, folks with autism and ADHD. And then there are people that do not have those experiences and just kind of like same old, and that's okay. All right, repetitive behaviors, interests, or movements, kind of tying into our monotropism here. This is a big, big part. So our sensory needs are one that we went to. Now we're on 3 here with repetitions. These are some of the deep diagnostic criteria. So repetitive behaviors can also be categorized with some level of inflexibility, which we'll get to later. This is really anything that you can think of that's repetitive. I keep repeating something out loud. I'm pacing in the same ways. I'm doing something with my hands. I'm rocking, I'm spinning, moving, and like I'm jumping up and down. Same thing with interest. So it doesn't always have to be the same interest, but more how you engage in it. Some people will invalidate themselves thinking that their special interests are things that they need to be interested in for life or only forever, and that's just not the case at all. Um, Special interest can change. Usually there are ones that are historic. Um, my tattoos are actually a really great tell of that. I have things that I don't currently engage in. Um, I'm not playing Pokemon and I'm not playing World of Warcraft and I'm not doing my possum rescue. Do I love all of those dearly? Yes. Do I have the desire to engage in them currently? No, I do not. But there's a deep love, and if somebody starts talking, it's like, oh my gosh, that's my thing. But more so of just ooh, exciting. Maybe somebody gets it. Maybe I can connect. But like, I need to talk until I'm finished about this topic. Almost like I'm ready to give a presentation, a speech. Um, which, fun fact for all of you, is that this is one of my special interests. So, and right now I am getting to do that. So, yay. Um, but right, it's like an urge, a pull. I need to talk about this. I need to complete every single thought about it. I need to basically info dump, if you've ever heard that. Like, and just think, all the info. Sometimes we don't always have willing participants, and they're like, I didn't know I was going to get into this. And we're like, ah, it's kind of like that. We're finding it, kind of linking back to monotropism, it's kind of your home base. When you're overwhelmed with anxiety, it's like, okay, I'm going to go down my Reddit rabbit hole of lore on whatever this is, or playing this, talking about this, reading. Um, right. Comfort and routine. Again, also kind of connecting with monotropism. This does not mean that all autistic people only want strict routines, do not ever want to deviate, and cannot go outside of a plan. Many times there is a desire for that. However, having set up accommodations, agenda, and concept of the how and why, of why we're going off the routine, can be helpful. And there are plenty of deeply spontaneous autistic folks. Um, it it doesn't always show up in ways that you think. Like for me, I don't like not eating the same breakfast every day, but I will not personally be so deeply upset that it affects my day. There are other people I know that if their day starts out with, I open the pantry and this is missing, brain shuts down. It makes it very hard to think of what is the next step. And then we get into this paralysis. Um, right. I know I've been kind of already talking about special interest and hyperfixation, so we'll just kind of gloss past that. Hyperfixations tend to be a little more present oriented. Special interest can be hyperfixations, um, but special interests are usually a little bit war torn and have been in your life for a while. Um, Many times things that are sudden hyperfixations can go into the library of special interest and some don't. You know, think of rollerblading, using cricket machines to make things. Um, Trying to think of other stuff, making bread, a lot of stuff that happened at the height of the pandemic. Um, some people don't really do those things anymore, right? So for that, some people were trying to find new things to do, and other people were hyperfixating. Um, Social and communication differences. This is not really understanding when to talk and when to listen, how to pick up on cues of when somebody is bored or not, understanding what somebody's emotions are while they're speaking, dealing with emotional shifts, um, kind of starting conversations, um, the desire to do so or lack thereof, social cue timing. There's a lot that goes into that. Difficulties in seeking, maintaining, and approaching relationships. Like me personally, if my phone doesn't light up with a text for days, I don't really care. If I'm still getting emails about my random interests, does that mean that I don't like the people in my life or I don't want to hear from them or that I want to, live underground? No. But I'm kind of my own friend, and maybe that sounds lonely or cringy or losery to somebody, but that's my difference and my difficulty in some ways. Is that I have such niche interests sometimes that I'm like, I don't know who wants to get into that right now. Um, you can also see this early, especially in childhood with play. Somebody's in their own world of imagination or specific kind of um, create and breaking down, like, or undoing something like taking apart a pen. Um, and another child comes up and is like, hey, let's do this. They may not get a response from an autistic person, not as like a rude, like, rebuff, but I didn't hear or process what you said, or I'm not sure what to do with that. My brain's trying to understand what doing your task is, and I am so monotropic in mine and have inertia with mine. I don't know about all that over there, right? Um, I think you can see throughout how some of these can definitely be viewed as these aspects of inflexibility. Um, like, people know if they're going to host me. Again, I'm using personal stuff because I feel it's better to speak on myself than other people. Um, you know, if somebody's going to host me for the night, I always give them a heads up, knowing that they do not need to feel obligated to do these things. Um, but I'm like, I need, like, if you're a household that stays up all night, or as kids, or as people that are going to be doing things past 10 o'clock, even 9 o'clock sometimes, it's very bright, it's noisy. You're going to wake up with chaos. There's animals running around, or I'm going to be loose around where these things could be going on. That is an absolute no-go. I will be freaked out and stay up all night. Some people think that's inflexible. I just know that that's kind of my sensory needs. Um, and that's it. Vocal tone and pacing. Uh, for, again, we're looking at, quote, common. Can tend towards monotone. I have no idea if my voice sounds monotone. I really. I know sometimes it can. I try to modulate, right? That's a little bit of masking and presenting, as I'm not sitting here talking like I do in my house. But I know sometimes I go lilting up and down, which is not considered a normal tone or rhythm. Um, so there's that. And then echolalia. kind of bringing that all the way back to earlier. That can be internal or external. That is kind of an echoing. Like if I hear something, my brain just scratches the itch. It likes how something sounds. Um, you bet I'm going to be repeating that. I'm going to want other people to repeat it. And I'm probably going to be saying it a lot out loud or internally. Some people know if they just hear me give a little giggle, I'm probably doing a lot of internal echolalia. This is also just side note. A lot of people think that we are making fun of others, and this is where kind of part of the autistic folks are mean or not empathetic. Is sometimes we'll repeat something and how someone says it, and they'll seem like a mimic, like a cruel mockery. So if somebody's like, "I just want to go to the store," and you're like, "Ooh, the store." Want to go to the store? They're like, can you stop? Why are you copying me like that? Whereas you're just like, that just gave me joy. Like, I love how you said that. But people don't always know. Okay, moving on. I know that was a lot. Not so uncommon traits. Extroversion. Yes, there are a ton of autistic extroverts. Now, I don't know that it is healthy or needed for anyone to psychoanalyze themselves so hard to wonder, especially, anybody that has any relation or connection to an experience of girlhood or womanhood, whether they correlate with that or not anymore, or did or don't. Um, or people think, is it just because of that I was expected to be generally pleasant and social? Or do I genuinely get my energy from others? That's what extroversion versus introversion really boils down to, is where do I get my energy? Being in a little pod in my home base, or out and about? People are feeding into that. And this doesn't mean party animal. This can mean somebody who does, 2 rounds of D&D a week, um, and every other night can be found at their local coffee shop, just kind of soaking up being amongst people, right? Delighting in the interest of others and attending to what others are attending to. So if, let's say that you are talking about something and maybe it's not a special interest, but you really like it, and then somebody goes, whoa, oh my gosh, did you just see that hawk, fly into the pine tree? Um, some people, like myself, I would be like, huh? Like I'm not looking at, I love hawks, I love birds, I love trees. I don't want to even do that, because now my brain is like, glitch. How do we go from here to there? Why? Why are we going from here to there? Are we ever going to get back to this topic? Okay. Whereas other people would be like, oh my gosh, whoa, look at that. Or, if, let's say you're involved in something of interest, you're reading a book, and somebody's like, hey, I'm so sorry, I know you're reading, but like, I just wanted to share this really cool clip with you before it expires, on Instagram. And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, tell me all about it. Oh, let me see. Even when people are pointing, they're going, whoa. Like, even if you hear those cues, no matter what it is you're doing, how immersed or not, the likelihood that you're gonna, whoa, versus, anyways, right. Higher shifting vocal pitch. Instead of that, yes, no, okay. The vocal pitch could be like, oh my God, that's so cool. Wow, wow. Um, oh, goodness. Or just incrementally going up in volume and then staying there, especially if this comes along with the extroverted autistic person. They're getting told, you're yelling in the restaurant, you're screaming, why are you getting so loud? When really, A, they're not actually all that loud, and B, it's not coming from a place of rudeness. It's just building excitement, especially if this is an extrovert, right? Who's gaining energy from the peopling. Um, being sensory seeking with friends or family, touching, grabbing, poking, prodding, rubbing hair, hug, 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 pat, 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 seeking out a lot of like sensory support. Um, that's me. I'm like in it, and I'm not historically a person that loves like touch, um, not like the caressing, seemingly gentle. Like I want like can I be like squished like a little can that's going in the recycling bin? People are like, what? Oh, that sounds weird. It can be just a part of being on the spectrum, right? The type of sensory input that you might be seeking from others. It kind of has to be on your terms, which again could maybe go back to that quote, inflexibility, sensory needs. Um, there are autistic folks that actually enjoy small talk, um, and are curious about it. Like I know people that are like, I do want to talk about the weather. And sometimes I'll give a chuckle because I'm like, well, what are you going to say about the weather? They're like, well, I want to talk about like the science behind how like raindrops come to form. And I'm like, okay, that might be a little bit different than small talk. Like, hey, how's the weather? Oh, sure is a hot one. But still, regardless, I know plenty of people that like to chat, especially from different kind of parts of the US. Like I know a lot of Midwesterners enjoy just BSing, right? Just hey, how you doing? Just as kind of a little nod to another person. Um, Not trying to get in anyone's business or anything, but just like a little, hey, what's up? Like we're just two people in this world, kind of doing a little head nod at each other. And last but not least, hyper empathizing. Hyper empathizing can often look like a lack of empathy. I know that autistic folks are kind of done being labeled with this. I know I am. Um, Sometimes you can see somebody have what looks like no minimal or an odd reaction that seems out of connection with what's going on to an issue when really they're hyper empathizing in that moment. The pain of what they're witnessing, their friend, family, partner, whomever, something in the world, community, um, is drawing so much from their reserve that it's actually like taking so much energy that the ability to emote, respond, can sometimes be taken away. This also unfortunately links in really heavily with people pleasing. Oftentimes, these folks are so aware of how somebody else is feeling, what's going on in their life. They never really say what they need to that person because, well, they're going through it right now, or this or that. Um, or I can't, or I'd be a bad person if there's so much unsaid that goes on in hyper empathizing that it's very misunderstood. So it's always a good reminder not to make assumptions, right? Okay. Well, I know this is it's kind of a lot going on here, and I know that I think my little head is blocking some of our info down here, but we'll be okay. So just some brief differences from other conditions. Um, these are the big three. Oh, now I'm bothered that I did not underline OCD. So I don't like that. Um, there's that Virgo behavior again. Anyways, social anxiety. This is a big one. Generalized anxiety is also theoretically present with us on this page, um, but I feel like that could be its whole own presentation. So I'm not trying to lump generalized anxiety and social anxiety together, but for the purposes of this slide and other things, I want to focus a little more specifically. Um, so social anxiety. Autism is neurodevelopmental. Social anxiety is not. This is not something that somebody has in the womb, right? They're not born with it. This does not pass along a genetic line, although social anxiety, you can witness environmentally from parents or whoever is raising someone, and that might impact how you interact with the world. This also typically expresses when someone's a teenager or an early adult, young adult. The big point, everything in social anxiety wraps around a fear of rejection and judgment, with all behaviors operating off of how can I avoid this? And folks with this may still very well seek to connect with others, um, but some autistic folks maybe would not. Hence why some is in caps, because we just talked about our folks that might really, really seek and love the peopling. Um, so this is social anxiety. These people most often really want to be in connection with others, and it is a pain point that rejection and judgment can be or could be present. So, not saying that it is not for autistic folks. Obviously, there's plenty of ostracization trauma that many of us can go through, but the operations are quite a bit different. And social anxiety, like I said, is just kind of fixated all around one thing. Whereas, as we saw with autism, we're dealing with repetitive behaviors, sensory needs, social differences, reciprocity, etc. ADHD. ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder. I don't really like to use the word disorder or condition, but its main focal points are attentiveness, focus, concentration, with some sensory needs that do come into play. There's a lot more mirroring than one might think between autism and ADHD. However, ADHD's impulsivity is more categorized by an executive functioning issue and difficulty of feeling restricted by routine or what may be seen as unnecessary tasks. This can sometimes look like demand avoidance in autism too, but this is, whereas a lot of autistic folks could say, okay, I have zero interest in this, but I could get good at it. Like, you're going to give me some weird task? Okay, I'll give it a whirl. A lot of ADHDers are not going to do that. They're going to be like, I need to have a buy-in. I don't want to sit around and do busy work. Um, I don't want to do random discussion post, stuff where you're like, it almost feels like an insult, and not a good use of the executive functioning capabilities of someone with ADHD. And again, it's not a choice or like an attitudinal thing, because that gets into perception stigma that is not appropriate. And concentration is key. So most things with concentration will be avoided by those with ADHD. That needs to be like read and highlighted. Um, whereas autistic folks may disengage due to dislike of a task. Even things that ADHDers want to concentrate on, sometimes they will not because it's part of having the condition. That things that invite concentration are kind of a no thanks. These brains are working very, very fast, as autistic brains do, but just in a different way. And just as a note, ADHD folks can fixate, but they may go all the way to the point of breaking a routine, which sometimes you can also see in autism as well. But being like, I'm going to get into woodworking, and then woodwork for like 3 days with little sleep, and then are like, okay, we're kind of done with that. We're burned out on that. Routines are kind of falling to the wayside. OCD. What's important here about OCD is that the behaviors are driven by intrusive thoughts. And although from the outside, we're hearing about it, the behaviors may look repetitive. They are to ameliorate or kind of, calm down the obsessions, usually becoming compulsions. Now, autistic folks stim to repetitive finger, hand, body movements, internal or external echolalia, any which way, to comfort, process, ground. It's very different. It's not like if I don't do this, something bad will happen, but more of a preventative, comfort, even joyful experience. And then it's always worth noting A large category of autistic folks are also separately diagnosed with OCD. As we'll see on the next slide, I believe, getting into comorbidities. All right, so some things to look out for, perhaps in yourself, loved ones, friends, family, just even knowing about this population if you're just seeking to learn more. OCD is very, very common. The last number I saw was like up to 17% of autistic folks. Sometimes I'm not a huge fan of stats because they just change constantly and based off of who is running the study. But OCD does run very strongly with autism. There's some biological mechanisms that make that a little more tangible and possible. All right, then there is ARFID, which is avoidant restrictive food intake disorder. This is, this involves a lot of sensory needs around food. Um, avoiding food, restricting food, as you see in the name, because the type, the smell. There's a question on autism assessment that says more or less that how food feels in my mouth is more important to me than how it tastes. That's something that can go along with this. So people, if they're safe foods, which safe foods are foods that are generally sensory friendly and desirable by the person dealing with this. So if safe foods are not around, sometimes these folks will not be eating. And a lot of people think this is an attitudinal, I want to be spoiled thing. Many times it's just an accommodation thing. I know plenty of people with this who, when they are not able to be accommodated, will lose a lot of weight to an uncomfortable malnutrition point, or they will get very ill, or they will keep trying to eat and then unfortunately vomiting. So getting back to the malnutrition. So fed is best. I'm not going to get into a whole thing about ARFID right now, but fed is best. Dissociative disorders has a lot to do with kind of mechanisms of the brain, compartmentalization. It tends to seem easier for autistic folks with trauma to have their brain go into a place that kind of breaks things off into like little boxes, or on the end of the spectrum with dissociative identity disorder, literally alters. Gender disruptions, so dealing with dysphoria, being of, a non-cisgender identity as well. That's a whole other can of worms I can get into. Is that it tends to be the black and white thinking often associated with autism does not often seem to apply to identity. Identity seems very fluid, curious, and flexible, which is kind of fascinating considering a lot of people feel like they don't have much of a sense of identity at times with autism. Connective tissue diseases. There's one that I am always forgetting, Marfan, and there's Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and things like that. Dysautonomia, disturbances of the autonomic nervous system, like POTS, gastrointestinal issues, IBS, GI stuff, dysmotility. You can see a lot of that, which can also connect back to ARFID as well. That's why making assumptions about people's food and eating patterns, thinking immediately they must, be dealing with anorexia or otherwise, is something to watch out for, because that can lead to improper treatment and care. And fun fact, I have 3 of the things on this list. I used to have 1, so that's how that goes. All right, and then we'll just kind of end here. I'll just kind of, I know this kind of comes in as like a little side note, but I just like to look at masking broken down into its multiple forms just real quick. So masking, there's compensation, These are things that autistic folks do to compensate for their autistic traits. It's basically the filler of masking. So anything where somebody feels like there is, you know, like deficits, they're trying to fill in the gaps with things. So you might see things like mimicry, echoing. If somebody's like, "Oh, well, thanks for coming to the party. Oh my gosh, thanks you too." That might not be how that person really wants to act, but they're trying to create a social back and forth. Researching social cues as well is a big one. Watching videos, spending time in the mirror, watching movies. Then there is masking. This is kind of traditional ways to hide traits, not exactly fill in, but just kind of stop them or quash them from being noticed. So forcing small talk, forcing eye contact. If you ever hear somebody talking about the looking between the eyebrows, that's a lot of the times things that people do to mask. Trying to make oneself overzealous, gregarious, making very exaggerated expressions. Um, this can kind of go along with compensation, right? If somebody researches social cues and sees that these are important things, that might be a way to mask. If this person wants to look at the ground when they talk, make zero eye contact, and they feel very like calm and flat, the way to hide that is basically to compensate mask. And then there's assimilation, which is overall ways to fit in. This is kind of a catch-all category. Taking on a persona, literally, that you can add some stuff from compensation and masking together, and basically have a persona that one puts on. Oh, this is who I am with these friends, this is who I am with that. I know these people like a little more of this, these people like a little more of that. Um, Avoiding social stuff completely, just kind of opting out and saying, okay, there's nothing to assimilate to if there's nothing to assimilate to. Or only showing up with a safe person. So you're not doing anything really new or different. You've got kind of your emotional support person there. So you may have to do less of these things on this list. So these are all, I know we talked about a lot today, and some of it might, like this here at the end, might have seemed just kind of put in, but I didn't want to not talk about it. And sometimes there's just no way to smoothly add things in. But I hope as you're kind of looking through, yes, this lovely photo of me, as you're looking through, that you feel seen, or that you begin seeing someone else, noticing, maybe I'm looking at that in a different light now. Remember, all of these things are simply occurrences, lived experiences. Masking and the reasons why we do it, a lot of times have to do with survivability. But I hope that, experiencing this, hearing about different thoughts and perspectives, or, thinking about how it applies to others in your life has been helpful. To maybe think of something outside of the box. I think we're often used to seeing certain traits in a very specific way based off of perception. Like if somebody isn't expressive, they don't care. Somebody's not making eye contact with me, they're not listening. Somebody doesn't look when I point, they don't want to hear what I have to say. Somebody's not emoting when I'm sad, they could care less about my feelings. And there's a lot more truth behind our eyes, right? Literally in our brain. So I hope this invites all of us to just be a little more curious about ourselves and others, and move away from optics and perception, which at the end of the day often don't mean a lot. So thank you for listening. If you ever have any line you want to drop to me, there's my email. And don't forget all the wonderful bounty that Pineapple Support has to provide in the form of webinars, workshops, support groups, one-on-one support and connection to sex work friendly therapists. And hopefully, as well, as we know, plenty of neurodivergent friendly therapists, um, LGBT friendly, and more beyond that. So thanks for listening and take good care.